The top three moments from game one of the wild card Mets Brewers. Luis Severino puts this team in line for the win with 6 innings of work in a day where Sevy had to show up and really make sure he went deep enough to not tax this bullpen even more than it was yesterday in the doubleheader. Sevy went out there and just got the job done.
And I know a lot of people have been making the comparison to the start that Jacob deGrom had in Game 5 against the Dodgers back in 2015 in the NLDS, where he wasn't his sharpest that night either. But after a tough first inning, he settled in and he gave the Mets what he needed.
The number 2 moment, the Jesse Winker triple. It had all of the drama you want from a playoff game.
Jesse Winker being put back in the lineup, starting at DH on Tuesday and coming up with that big triple to tie the game.
Number 1 moment, Jose Iglesias, infield hit, running out that play to first base. What does he do? Dives head first into first, beats the throw by half a second. Jose Iglesias is going down as a Mets folk hero, no matter what happens this year. Hey, thanks for meeting us at the Apple. I'm Vito Calisi. You can follow me on Twitter at Vito F. Calisi. That's Jonathan Barron. You can follow him on Twitter at JMB9191. And John, before we left the office, do you remember what the last thing I said to you was?
I'm going to be honest, I don't. Dude, yesterday, the last, 36 hours, total blur, all worth it, loving it, running on nothing but fumes and vibes right now. Tell me and tell the listeners, what was the last thing you told me before we parted ways earlier today?
Whenever John and I leave, work, and we have one of these where we know we're going to see each other online, we say, see you on StreamYard. Said to each other, see you on StreamYard. And I said, John, it's going to be a really good podcast today as you walked out the door. And I want you to know, I had a feeling from this morning, and I don't know if you believe in signs, but I want to tell you about a sign I saw this morning. We went out after the game last night, and I left my car at Citi Field. So I walked over to our coworker Jetta's place to get a ride from her into the ballpark today. And as I was standing outside of her place, a yellow cab passes by me. And in this moment, I was literally thinking to myself, man, I'm feeling a little nervous about playoffs. I'm, just the Mets fan in me was coming in and creeping in. And I was like, man, Milwaukee was tough last week. Feeling a little nervous. All I want is home playoff games. And at that exact moment, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not kidding you. At that exact moment, a yellow cab passes by. And what is the ad that flashes on as it passes by? Get your Mets postseason tickets on top of the cab.
Mets came one step closer to making that dream. I put this on Twitter. The final Sunday of the season, I took the LIRR to Citi Field that day, and I was walking on the boardwalk that you take when you get off the train, with that beautiful view of Citi Field. And I tweeted this picture and said, "Man, this scene, an hour or 2 hours before first pitch of a playoff game at Citi Field, something that we haven't had in a couple of years." That was a very short run. I remember back in 2015 and what the stadium, the surrounding area, just the day-to-day of October was like and how exciting every day was and every pitch was. And man, I know that it sounds cliche and we talk about it, we've talked about it all year, but this team just feels different with the way that it goes about its business, the way that it bounces back nonstop. Again, in game 1, they go down early 2-0. They take the lead. They relinquish the lead. They take it right back. This is a team that won 41 games in come from behind fashion during the regular season, the last of which obviously the most important, the heroics on Monday, which now that we've had a little bit of time to digest everything that we saw, last night got a little perhaps fuzzy at points. That truly was one of the biggest regular season wins in Mets history. That was truly one of the biggest home runs in regular season Mets history.
I stand by it. I stand by it.
Yeah.
There's nothing there's not been anything like that to catapult the Mets into the playoff. Like, there's been big games. There's the Sunday Night Baseball game in 2015 that we've talked about. There's the Johan no-hitter. There's games in 06, but there's been nothing that literally took this team from outside looking in to just 100% clinched you're going to the postseason.
Yeah. So, you consider all of that and so many other incredible wins the Mets recorded this season. And then for them to come out swinging in a place that we all know the history, them, especially recently in Milwaukee, the troubles that they've had. And, so let's get into it. First of all, what a gutsy performance by Luis Severino, who the Mets were thin in the bullpen today.
We're gonna get to that, John. We're gonna get to that.
All
We
right,
looked at
I
the
just want to give
document. That's
a little
part of the
taste, a little
rundown.
teaser, because
I
I know
know,
that
but we
Brendan,
have a rundown. We have a
I know,
rundown for a reason. And John, I
Brendan,
have a question for you. I have a
yeah,
question
let's
for
hear it.
you about this game and
Let's hear it.
about the matchup. And I was wondering this to myself today. Do you think there's something to the fact that this team, and it's like you said, this team has come from down many times this year. This team has played baseball with their back against the walls for the last month. Okay. Like the team said, from the team meeting on, they were looking at it like, why not us play without pressure, win game by game? But the last month, it's gotten a lot more serious, and they've really had to win every single game they did, which you see by the fact that they got in by a single game. Do you think there's something to the fact that this team has been playing with that pressure for this many weeks now, and especially a game like yesterday? And then you take a look at a team like the Milwaukee Brewers, who pretty much locked the division up back in April or May. They never really had any real competition from the Cubs. The Cubs were in the wild card race with us really the entire time until they fell off. Do you think there's something to the fact that this team has just completely been tested already and finding themselves in a real pressure cooker like today? They've been battle tested.
Yeah, I mean, the Mets have been playing playoff games all September. I mean, when we were
Yeah.
talking in June, July, and the wild card picture was really starting to take shape, and yeah, for a point, there were like 7 teams that were in contention. That Cub game on Sunday Night Baseball we talked about, that playoff vibe. I mean, you go back to really the beginning of June, because the Mets put themselves in a position where for them to be a playoff team and finish with 89 wins, they had to play better than 600 ball the rest of the way. They couldn't take it easy and play 540 ball. That wasn't going to get it done after the start that they had and the position they found themselves in because of their uneven start. So all the games that this team played really since the start of June have been important. The Mets were equal to that task. Now, on the other side of things, the Brewers, and this is not, meet at Bernie's slide. This is meet at the Apple. But the Brewers
That'd be
right now,
cool.
especially after this game 1 loss, the Brewers have now lost 6 consecutive postseason games. They've lost 10 of their last 11 postseason games. This is becoming a little bit of Minnesota Twins versus the Yankees, where this is something that's probably festering in that clubhouse in Milwaukee, definitely on WTMJ. That's the station the Brewers broadcast their games
Dude,
on the radio.
every time you drop local radio stations like it's common knowledge is insane.
Bob Uecker, man. But
This goes back to Future of Flushing. I just like it's you just John, if you name a town in Idaho, he probably knows the call sign.
yeah, I don't know about that, but that's a team that is now obviously with its back against the wall, and it's a good point you make. The Brewers were the first team to clinch a playoff spot. Now we know that Pat Murphy's a great manager, and this is a really neat series because you have Carlos Mendoza going up against Pat Murphy. Those 2 guys are going to be finalists for NL Manager of the Year. How it's going to shake out, I don't know, but you have 2 managers who have had incredible success in their first years as manager, and Pat Murphy has done an incredible job with the Brewer team. Now, let's not forget, lost Brandon Woodruff to the shoulder injury, traded Corbin Burns away in the offseason, lost pieces, lost Christian Yelich during the season, and they still had the incredible year that they did. But all things considered, having said that, now the doubt starts to creep in and the memories of 2023, losing 2 games at home to the Diamondbacks. The Brewers led in those games as well and let them slip away. The bullpen, a lot is going to be talked about with the decision to pull Freddie Peralta when Pat Murphy did. Here's the thing. The bullpen is a strength of this Brewers team. In their last 8 games, and I know that's a microcosm, they already clinched, but they were still trying to win baseball games because Pat Murphy was saying, I'm not letting this team take its foot off the gas. Their last 8 games, the bullpen, Milwaukee bullpen, combined for 38 innings, allowed just 7 total runs. In game 1, the Mets hung a 5 spot against that Milwaukee bullpen. So to do that is an incredible feat, the way that the Mets did it. But Pat Murphy got into his bullpen early because that's been a strength. And he, I think, wanted to get into his bullpen. That's part of his plan. That wasn't a fallback. Whereas, maybe Luis Severino gets knocked out early. He didn't. He towed the line. I know we're going to talk about Sevy's performance, but Carlos Mendoza wasn't trying to get into his bullpen, especially after what the Mets had to go through yesterday. Pat Murphy was. The Mets were just equal to the task, the 5-run inning. And here's my favorite part about game 1. The Mets did not hit a home run in this victory. They put up 8 runs and they didn't homer. And I talked about this today with Jeff Levering. The Mets, and I've talked about this with you throughout the season, the Mets have out-homered opponents to death. And you know it's coming. You know the long ball is coming. The Mets can play that game. But for them to really do what the Brewers do, which is get on base, walk, make contact, put balls in play. JD Martinez with a big 2-strike hit. Mark Vientos with a big hit going the other way. Jose Iglesias, another infield single, just a contact merchant. And when he puts the ball in play with his speed, he's constantly legging out base hits. He did that again today, ties the game. The Mets just did so many things right in this ball game that you love to see. And here's another nugget that I love. And then I'm going to let you get back in there. I know I'm doing the thing that you tell me not to do, but there's a lot to digest here. Hard hit balls in game one. Hard hit being batted balls with an exit velocity of 95 plus miles per hour or higher. The Mets had 11, nice number. Mets pitchers held the Brewers lineup to 4. That is not a number that you see oftentimes in Major League Baseball games, and that's throughout a regular season. That's a 70-win team. This is a Milwaukee Brewer team that has Willie Adames in its lineup, and Rhys Hoskins, and William Contreras, some big bats in that lineup. Jackson Chourio, who had 2 of those hits, and Jackson Chourio is a really good player, the first player to ever go 2020 at age 20. The Mets pitching did an incredible job keeping the Brewers bats at bay. They really played that Brewer baseball, just annoying death by 1,000 cuts, and they earned themselves an 8-4 victory in game one.
Yeah, I think I don't want to harp on something John just said, but just to really nail down one of the aspects of that is you're not going to win a World Series off of just home runs. We saw that in 2015 with the Mets, where Yoenis Cespedes was just on a tear. Daniel Murphy just went on that 7 home run streak. That's
Lucas Duda. Don't forget
Lucas Duda.
Home runs.
I won't forget Lucas Duda. But my point is, it's like those are great. Those are fantastic. Those are the most fun things in the game. But those aren't going to actually win you a championship. It's playing small ball, really situational hitting. And that's what we saw tonight. And this game was super exciting. And we cannot state enough how important in this wild card series it is to win that first game. Because when you just look at the bare bones numbers, teams who win the wild card up to this point in this new format are 8-0 when they win game one. And only one of those teams didn't sweep. And you might know this if you're a Mets fan. We were the one team to not get swept.
It was the San Diego Padres in 2022 is who it was.
Exactly. As I just said, it was the one team. We were the one team to not get swept. We're that magic number. So here we are right now after an exciting victory, moving on to game 2 with the really something that I don't think every single Mets fan was thinking today when they woke up. I mean, you're confident in your team, but you're not thinking when you wake up, holy cow, this could all be over tomorrow in a good way. But it was fun. It was just sick to see. And I think we saw today that playoff experience goes such a far way. It's like I said before, just the Milwaukee Brewers, they haven't been tested yet. This was their first real challenge. And when you look at guys who are playoff tested and playoff proven, you see a guy like JD Martinez, who we've been waiting all year to see this come out in him. We've seen it a few times throughout the season. He was player of the week that one week where he just helped the Mets really turn things around. But tonight, JD Martinez comes up in a gigantic spot. And you, the fan, you might be at home thinking, man, Jesse Winker was looking good so far. Why would you take him out at this spot? He's hot. He's getting booed by the crowd. This is what Jesse Winker feeds off of. Then JD Martinez comes in and gets the boys going because you know what? This is normal for him. JD Martinez has been here before. JD Martinez, in his postseason career, has a 298 batting average, 10 home runs, and 33 RBI. 2 of those RBIs were today. So it's just great to have that veteran presence that we've been waiting to see. Get that addiction fed nice and early.
Well, it's veteran presence, and it's also, once again, this team being so deep and Carlos Mendoza being able to pull a card out of his back pocket like it's a game of Uno and throwing it down and matching up, because Pat Murphy went to Aaron Ashby and Jesse Winker, obviously the lefty, was who Murphy was looking at. And I'm sure Pat Murphy knew that JD Martinez was on the bench and that Carlos Mendoza could possibly go to him in that spot. And he did. And it paid off. And, Martinez comes up with a 2-run single. But for Mendy to be able to mix and match and really have a platoon advantage in seemingly any spot that he's forced into, based off of what the other manager does, this team, again, 1 through 9, 1 through 26, because now it's 26-man roster. I saw a great nugget before. I think it was Mike Mayer tweeted this, that 7 of the 8 RBIs by the Mets tonight were collected by guys who weren't in the opening day starting lineup. This team is different. This team has transformed itself from spring training. And I think it's also so neat and so poetic that I think it was March 21st when the Mets signed JD Martinez. And the conversation on that day was, oh, well, that means Mark Vientos is going down to AAA. And, he's not going to be the DH. It's going to be JD Martinez. And we all know the story that Mark Vientos wrote for himself in 2024. such a huge part of this incredible Mets run that they've been on. And for them to both come up with hits in that 5-run fifth inning is just awesome. This team is so deep. And there are guys who may not have had the biggest impacts down the stretch in the regular season. Come playoff time, the slate is wiped clean. None of that matters. There are guys who are going to step up and answer the call under the bright lights of October. It is a different game once the calendar flips to October. Every 90 feet matters. The advantage, the cat and mouse game that we talked about with guys like Brandon Sproat, so many other major leaguers, that game that you play, pitcher batter. Starling Marte had the two longest batted balls in this game. I know he had a sac fly that gave the Mets the lead early in the game. Starling Marte is going to come up with big hits at some point in this postseason. I feel like people aren't really talking about Starling Marte. Starling Marte is a big piece of what the Mets were doing. Back in June when the Mets went on that run, Starling Marte was a huge part of that. In 2022, Starling Marte was a huge part of what the Mets did. When he got hurt, things really started to fall apart. I've said it many, many times. I'm going to say it again. Pete Alonso is going to come up with big hits. We know it's in there. This man is a bona fide slugger. He has the third most home runs in Mets history. There's no reason why myself or you or any of our great listeners shouldn't believe that Pete Alonso is going to do the damn thing. It's going to happen, and it's going to be glorious, and I'm going to take such a victory lap when it does. I cannot wait. Jesse Winker with a big triple, and we know that, Jesse and the Brewers and Willie Adames were jawing.
That's going to come up, John. Read the document.
I'm sorry. I'm just going
Wait,
down
John,
the list.
Did you see Josh Satin is all in?
I would imagine Josh Satin's all in. I got one more guy I want to mention, and then we'll talk about Josh Satin. The guy that started the rally yesterday in the eighth inning in Atlanta with a double, once again did it today against his former team, Tyrone MF Taylor. This guy has been an absolute godsend for this Mets team. As an extra outfielder, this team has so many outfielders, so many guys that can get it done. And that's why I said it a couple weeks ago. No one wants this Mets team right now. This is a dangerous team that can beat you in so many damn ways. And you can't rely on one or two guys in a baseball lineup because we know that that's not how things work. The Yankees, if Judge and Soto aren't hitting, they tend to struggle because it might not be such a well-rounded team. I'm not trying to take any shots at the Yankees. I think the Yankees, I like their odds. Let's put it that way. But this Mets team is so damn deep, and it was on display on Tuesday night. Mets win game 1.
No, dude, this was watching this game at home was the roller coaster we felt all season. I mean, the Mets go down early, all of a sudden they come back, lead gets taken away, but then they just run away with it. I'm sitting on my couch just like going nuts at every single pitch, every single moment. This is the way to watch a baseball game. And then I see on Twitter that Josh Satin is pumped up. Josh Satin tweeted, starting Winker, who hasn't played in many games, was bold and it worked, and pinch hitting JD worked. Mendoza is the man right now. I just was pumped that Josh Satin was. I love when former players are watching along with us on Twitter and getting their input in. It's just like it's so much fun to see guys like Jerry Blevins, who obviously has his own podcast, stuff like that. Like it adds a new aspect when you know that the guys you watched play are also watching the game with you. So it was just sick. And then one thing I wanted to bring up, because ESPN did it. ESPN did a whole segment talking about Grimace, just trying to figure things out. And then, they brought up, they were like, why the hell is his glove on his left hand? Why is he wearing the wrong glove on the wrong hand? I don't like that. It's ridiculous. And I want to say, as I tweeted, we've told this story on this podcast before. I'll tell it again. That was Mr. Met's glove. Mr. Met is the left-handed one. I just handed Grimace Mr. Met's glove. Grimace ran with it, went out there, threw a pitch. That is why Grimace was wearing his glove on the wrong hand. It's simple. ESPN, you could have done your research. Your stats guy could have looked it up and seen Meet at the Apple. We talked about this. But I want to get into things now because this was an exciting game. Oh, wait. Sorry. Big mention. The postseason video that the Mets dropped today. Oh, what a story. We have to give mention to the people who put that together. I know Amanda was a gigantic part of that. Mo Abate was a giant part of that. Anthony Vario, Amanda Giannone, I didn't say her full name, but all of these guys were just huge parts. Safia was a huge, our editing team is so talented and puts out some of the best videos. I think this is the best playoff video I've seen this year. And I will say there was a playoff video that last week I was throwing to everybody saying I loved it. So I'm not that biased, but great job, Danilo, with some amazing animations. Brian Smith with some amazing graphics in there. And fans, just look at the video because try to pause it and look at that cork board because there's some fun Easter eggs in there that are from just moments throughout the season. But that's the kind of video that gets you fired up. Like, don't you want, John, don't you want to see that video next week at Citi Field before the team takes the field?
42,000 rally towels flying, maybe some extra special things that we might have in store for you guys that I've alluded to already. We are one win away, and it's a tall hill to climb. Don't get me wrong. To borrow a quote from the great Hallie Rose, there's still one more hill to climb before we can talk about hosting a playoff game in Queens, which I know that so many people throughout the regular season, as things started to build and the vibe in the stadium really started to take shape, and we came up with new traditions and new things that like no one on the other side wants to be a part of and subject to. We are one victory away from making those, man, this place in October would hit different, a reality. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it right now.
And
Just,
you know who
you
to
know,
be against? The last place it was a zoo against. Dude, isn't it nuts that the NLDS could be two division rivals versus each other?
it that would be nuts. You know what else would be nuts?
The
You
fact that the
know,
Mets and the Phillies never played each other in a playoff game before.
yep,
The revenge tour continues. I mean,
it's never happened.
there's
Like, how crazy is
well,
that? It's never happened.
we talked about that with Todd a few weeks ago on the podcast when we did the Phillies preview.
Yep.
It and then just both stadiums would be so hard to tell what was going on because fans are going to travel to both places. Mets are going to go to Philly. Philly fans are going to be coming here, but we got to get there first. We got to
Oh,
get there first.
100%. 100%. Look, that
And there's
Brewer
one
that
more
Brewer
win to get.
team that Brewer team's prideful. That's a prideful Brewer team. They're gonna throw Frankie Montas out there in all likelihood tomorrow. I'm sure Pat Murphy's gonna be aggressive with Devin Williams at some point. Trevor McGill will probably factor in that game at some point. So yeah, we're not trying to put the horse
No,
before the cart here whatsoever.
I'm not saying when you win game one, you're at a disadvantage by any means, but when you win game one, game two, that other team's back is up against the wall, like we were talking about before. And you know what that means? That means they're not afraid to throw anything at you. They're going to throw every single they have. They're going to throw every single thing they have at this team tomorrow. So tomorrow's going to be a friggin' battle. Tomorrow is going to be game seven vibes. Like it is going to feel outrageous tomorrow. So get ready for that game. It's going to be really fun. But before we look forward, we got to look backward. We got to talk about the top three moments from game one of the wild card, Mets Brewers. Number three moment, you got to give it to Luis Severino. Luis Severino puts this team in line for the win with 6 innings of work when it didn't look like Sevy had his best stuff. In a day where Sevy had to show up and really, really make sure he went deep enough to not tax this bullpen even more than it was yesterday in the doubleheader. Sevy went out there and just got the job done.
He did. I mean, he ran into trouble early in the game. The command was a little spotty early in the game. He bent, he didn't break. And he gave the Mets the 6 innings that they needed, knowing that a lot of guys in the bullpen were down, probably Phil Maton being one of those guys, Edwin Diaz being another one of those guys. And when the Mets gave him that lead, when they scored 5, he went back out there and he retired the Brewers 1-2-3. And I know a lot of people have been making the comparison to the start that Jacob deGrom had in Game 5 against the Dodgers back in 2015 in the NLDS, where he wasn't his sharpest that night either. But after a tough first inning, he settled in and he gave the Mets what he needed. Luis Severino threw a big 2-ball, got Rhys Hoskins his ground no double play early in the game. And even when the Brewers took the lead back 4-3, he put an end to the damage right there. And I'm sure the Mets ran off the field, took their hats off, and grabbed their bats and said, let's go get some runs. And Sevy getting out of that inning with the score being only 4-3 was absolutely massive. And we know that Luis Severino has had postseason struggles. I remember the start he made against as a Yankee against the Red Sox back in 2018 at Yankee Stadium in Game 3 of the 2018 ALDS. This was a big night for Luis Severino, and it was obviously so important for the Mets to win Game 1 yesterday so they could save Sevy for this game and have their starting rotation kind of be right on track. Otherwise, you'd probably see Sean Manaea on short rest in Game 1 instead of Luis Severino. Now Sean Manaea is set up to go take the ball for the Mets on regular rest in Game 2, the guy that has really emerged as the ace all year, but Luis Severino getting it done. What a signing by David Stearns and company as he continues his great 2024 season with a great gutsy outing in Game 1 of this wild card round.
All right, the number two moment, the Jesse Winker triple to put this team ahead. It had all of the drama you want from a playoff game. Jesse Winker clears the bases, gets to third base. They pull away, and all of a sudden you start realizing that guys are jawing at each other. You're getting that atmosphere you're looking for in a playoff game. You're seeing like vibes of what we saw week one before Jesse Winker even got here. Jesse Winker doesn't even know about what happened on opening day. But that triple just showed that this team fights. This team does, like you said, John, this team bends. It does not break. And I mean, without a doubt, that was a number two moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jesse Winker, obviously, there's a little bit of bad blood. I think that
Yeah.
much is obvious. I think we can say that here on the podcast. Look, Jesse Winker is the kind of guy who you want him on your side, right? If you're on the
Yep.
opposing side, he's probably someone that can really get under your skin and bother you a little bit. And it seems like that happened with Willie Adames on Tuesday night. But forget all that. Jesse Winker being put back in the lineup, starting at DH on Tuesday and coming up with that big triple to tie the game, and then of course scoring to take the lead, and just showing the snarl, that IDGAF attitude. I'm not gonna say the word, not gonna give you extra
Good
work
job.
here, as it's
Good
yep,
job.
I got you. But you love that when it's on your team. I mean, I don't know if it's a perfect comparison, but Sean Avery was a hockey player that I loved watching when I was younger because he was an IDGAF MFer who,
Big bike
if
guy.
you're if you're playing against him, yes, big bike guy. If you're playing against him, you hate Sean Avery. Sean Avery went to 29 different NHL rinks around the league, and those teams didn't like him. But us at the Garden, not many guys had that sing song chant of their last name, Henrik. It was Avery because he was the kind of guy that you loved having on your side, who is going to go to battle, who is just down in the trenches and down to do whatever it takes to win. Jesse Winker's that kind of guy also. So I'm sure it was really rewarding for him to get that big hit in his former place against his former team. And whatever happened on the field, I don't know. We're not there. Let those guys settle it. But you know what? You settle it on the scoreboard. And Jesse Winker had the last laugh in game one.
I've used this comparison for somebody else before, but I'm going to use it for him now. Bring up players with that mentality. It's just like Draymond Green with the Warriors. Draymond Green was that guy that brought out that animal mentality of like, we're going to go out here, we're going to break heads, we're going to take care of business. And that moment reminded me a lot of that. So it was fun. I mean, today was all the drama you want from a baseball game where your team comes out and wins on the other end of it. But let's move on. Number one moment from the first game of the wild card round. It's I don't think anybody has any doubt. I don't think there will be any disagreement with me. Jose Iglesias, infield hit, running out that play to first base. What does he do? Dives head first into first, beats the throw by half a second. And it's that grit, it's that hustle, it's everything we've seen out of Jose Iglesias all year that's made him be one of, I will say, Jose Iglesias is going down as a Mets folk hero, no matter what happens this year. He's already cemented his legacy. And that was just an example of it. That grit he showed in tonight's game to just finally put the Mets ahead for the final time.
We've had conversations with Jose. We've had conversations with people that know Jose, and we've spoken to them about Jose. Dick Scott's one of those guys that we've talked to. Carlos Mendoza has also given his perspective on Jose Iglesias. And here's the thing: Jose was an all-star. He didn't need to keep playing. Last year in 2023, he wasn't in the major leagues at all. He stuck with it. He said he had more baseball left in him. I looked. Jose Iglesias is back in the postseason for the first time since 2013. He was on the Tigers team that lost to the Red Sox in 6 games back in the 2013 ALCS. That was the last time that this man played in a playoff game before Tuesday night. It's been that long. So, Jose, we've heard a lot about the appreciation and the perspective that he now has for the game because, he didn't know if he was ever going to have these chances. Forget playing in the postseason, but even in the regular season as a major leaguer, he obviously got that chance this year. And we know how impactful he's been both on the field and off the field. But for him to now step into the brightest of lights in October and come up with that massive game tying hit, all hustle there. He's now hit safely in 23 straight games. Going back to the regular season, I said it yesterday. One of the more poignant things I think I said, given the state of mind I was in, there really is going to be a documentary made about what has gone down with Jose Iglesias this season, a guy who found himself, you know, possibly looking at the end of his baseball career, and coming into camp this year, accepting the assignment to AAA Syracuse, helping so many guys, being that veteran leader, being a guy who's helped Mark Vientos that we've spoken to Mark about and Jose about, and a guy who has just made such an impact. I mean, forget the vibes, which are incredible, but he's also been such a great baseball player. The defense, we've talked a lot about the Mets turning ground balls into outs. He's been a huge part of that. Not a big batting average guy, but him hitting, close to 340 during the regular season, him coming up with all the two hit runner, two out RISP hits that he's had this season. It's just a continuation of it. He
The
has been,
flexibility he had, the fact that they were able to look like Mark Vientos has grown as a third baseman this year, but the fact that they were able to just turn this into a completely defensive heavy, um, alignment towards the end of the game. Like the second I saw Harrison Bader out there, all of a sudden I saw Luis Angel playing second. I saw Jose Iglesias at third. You kind of felt like it's really incredible to be able to have this.
it's kind of a victory formation in a way. When
Yeah.
when the Mets are throwing those guys out into the field late in games, that they're closing in on a victory. And Carlos Mendoza, once again, he has the tools to be able to do that because of how deep of a roster David Stearns and company have given him to work with. But for Jose to come up with that hit, keep the line moving the way he did, he's hitting number 2 in this very good lineup. He's not being
Yeah.
shoved down to the bottom of the order, and it's like, yeah, he's hitting 8 and 9, and you kind of just wait for that part of the lineup to get through it, and then you get back to the big boppers. No, he is in the middle of all of it. It is just so incredible. And here, I didn't bring this up yesterday when we spoke to Jose. Remember, I originally pitched him on doing the performance
Yeah.
on the podcast, and he said, yeah, but you know what? I want to wait until we're going to clinch a playoff spot, and then we're going to have a big concert for all the fans at Citi Field. It's going to be me. We're going to have some country singers. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Well, guess what? Yesterday, the Mets clinched that playoff spot. So Jose, I know that the remix is dropping on October 11th, I believe, is the date that he
That's
announced
what he said today.
in the scrum today. Jose, you owe us one, man. You owe us. You owe the Met fans. You owe everybody because, I mean, let me take that back. He doesn't owe anybody anything because, well, OMG, but he's given us more than we've bargained for. But it would be really cool to see this team celebrate. And man, one last thing I want to say. I know we're going to wrap up here pretty soon, but for this team to win the way that they did yesterday in that game, that I mean, you look at the win probability chart of that game, down 3-0 in the 8th inning. Schwellenbach's
I sorry. Oh, you're talking about the yeah. Sorry, I thought you were
yeah,
talking about the
no,
win
yesterday,
probability chart.
Schwellenbach shoving. It just seems like, okay, game 2 is our option here. Then the Mets score 6 runs in an inning, and you're like, oh my God, this is it. We're actually doing this. And then right away they give it back, and you're like, oh my God, this is it. We're actually doing this. And then for Francisco Lindor to then come up with the huge home run that he hits. If you're in that dugout or on that plane to Milwaukee after the game, and I'm sure the Mets are going to be facing adversity at another point because all teams do on their way to where you eventually want to go. You watch any World Series champion DVD, there's always a point where a team overcomes some sort of adversity. This team, whenever that next point of adversity comes, how could they not look at each other and say, "Oh yeah, remember that day, September 30th in Atlanta? Like we did this. We've been here. We've done this before. We got this. No problem." That's the kind of special win that can propel a team because it gives you that experience, that ability, that common belief that, yeah, it's fine. As long as we have some more outs to play with, some more wiggle room, we're alive. And that team, they don't want this. They don't want this smoke. And yeah, I mean, I know that baseball is fleeting. Things change quickly. We know that. But man, the clock just struck midnight. So now it's Wednesday, October 2nd. October's off to a great start after September got off to a great or finished in an incredible way. And it's on to game 2. Sham and I on the bump. Mets trying to close the Brewers out. And I guess we'll be here to break it all down for the
We'll be here
fans
back
after
tomorrow.
game 2.
Yeah. John, what do you think about real quick? What do you think about the kind of silly win probability meter that ESPN shows?
So I wasn't paying that much attention to it tonight. I know that the
I
Apple
sent you
brought
some pictures of it. I
yeah,
told you about some. The Mets would
yeah.
be leading. The Mets would be leading by a run, and somehow they would be down like
Look,
20%.
it's an algorithm that, takes a lot of things into account. I'm sure it takes into account who's coming up the next inning, pitch total. It's a proprietary blend that we're not going to probably get the answers to, but it doesn't bother me. I know that like it's kind of funny, and I think once again, Joe, shout out LGGGM again, and shout out Jeff. He was upset I didn't give him that shout out. They said this like if ESPN is showing me as a viewer, maybe I don't have a dog in the fight, that one team has a 90% chance to win the game. I'm probably going to go try to watch something else if you're telling me this game is over. So I don't know. I feel like it could backfire a little bit. I know Apple does more. They do like probability of reaching base.
Yeah. They do
But
play-by-play probability. They don't do, like, overall game probability, and
yeah,
also, like, look, I think Mets fans are very online, and I do think there's a piece of, like, part of TV is engagement, and you know what? If we put up some not Mets skewing stuff, we might get some nice tweets out of this. I mean, that's just a conspiracy on my end, but who knows? And I just want to give a honorable mention to one moment. Um, I said this to John the other day. One of my favorite things to see in the world during a Mets game is Harrison Bader turning around and doing his shuffle, because I know when Harrison Bader does that,
he's
that
got
ball
it.
is landing in a mitt and he's got it. And it's become like a good I I just want to give that I want everybody to feel comfort in that when you turn around when you see him do his little karaoke. But we move on to game 2 tonight as you are listening to this, because this does come out in the morning. We appreciate you being here with us all year. We're hoping to have a lot more games this month. So let's keep it rolling. You can follow me on Twitter at Vito F. Khaleesi. You can follow John on Twitter at JMB9191. Follow this podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Please give us a review, give us a rating. You know what? You start giving us ratings and reviews, we'll start reading them on the podcast, okay? Give us a 5-star rating, say something about us, and we'll read it on the show. But thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you back after game 2.